The water was simmering on the stove as I chopped onions for the sauce that would accompany our Wednesday night dinner. David had called earlier to let me know he'd be home late again. Important meeting, he'd said, with that hurried tone I'd come to know so well after 12 years of marriage. I sighed, glancing at the kitchen clock. 9 o'clock in the evening. It was the 4th consecutive week he'd been working late on Wednesdays. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, pulling me from my thoughts. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the door, wondering who could be visiting at this hour. When I opened it, I found myself face to face with a delivery man holding an exquisite bouquet of red roses. His expression showed a mixture of fatigue and frustration. "Good evening, ma'am. Sorry to bother you, but I've tried delivering these flowers 3 times to the address indicated, and couldn't find anyone. I called the sender's contact number several times, but it always goes to voicemail. As a last resort, I came to the personal registration address that was in our system." I frowned, confused. There must be some mistake. I didn't order any flowers. "The delivery isn't for Rachel Harris," explained the delivery man, consulting a small card attached to the arrangement. "It's an order made by Mr. David Harris to be delivered to someone named Wendy Powell." My body froze upon hearing my husband's name. Red roses? For another woman? I tried to maintain my composure while my eyes caught the small white card partially visible among the flowers. With trembling fingers, I reached out. "May I see that for a moment?" The delivery man seemed hesitant, but handed me the bouquet. With my heart racing, I opened the small envelope and read the message written in handwriting I knew all too well. "Can't wait for next Wednesday. With love." A bitter taste rose in my throat as the world seemed to slow down around me. Wednesdays. Those damned Wednesdays when David worked late. How could I have been so blind? So many signs I had ignored. The different perfume I sometimes smelled on his shirts. The calls he answered while walking away from me. The sudden need for privacy with his cell phone. "Are you okay, ma'am?" The delivery man's voice brought me back to reality. He looked at me with concern, probably noticing my pale face and shaking hands. "Yes, I am," I lied, regaining my composure. Just a bit surprised. My husband didn't mention he had ordered flowers. "I'll take them, thank you." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to cause any problems," he said, clearly realizing something was wrong. His expression conveyed discomfort. He had certainly understood the situation. "Yes, I'm sure. Don't worry." I forced a smile as I signed the delivery receipt. These things happen. When I closed the door, my legs weakened. I walked to the sofa and sat down, still holding the bouquet of roses. The flowers that should symbolize love now seemed to mock me. Our marriage, everything we had built together. Wendy Powell. Who was this woman? Young? Beautiful? What did she have that I didn't? I ran my fingers over the card again. Can't wait for next Wednesday. So there would be a next Wednesday. A meeting already planned. A continuation of something that apparently had been happening for some time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside David, listening to his peaceful breathing while he slept without any sign of guilt. When he arrived home, around 11 o'clock, I had already hidden the flowers in the guest room closet and rehearsed a normalcy I was far from feeling. He kissed me distractedly, commented on the exhausting meeting, and after a quick shower, fell asleep without even noticing my red eyes or my restlessness. The hours passed slowly as I contemplated the techo of our bedroom. My mind raced through memories and possibilities. 12 years of marriage, our wedding day, the house we bought together, the dreams we shared. Had it all been a lie? Or had he simply grown tired of me? Of us? By dawn, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront David. Not yet. If he wanted to play this game, I would play too, but by my own rules. No tears, no hysteric scenes, no desperate pleas. No, Rachel Harris wouldn't be that kind of woman. When Thursday morning came, I prepared breakfast as usual. David kissed me goodbye, completely unaware that I knew his secret. As soon as he left, I took the bouquet from its hiding place. The roses were still fresh, their red petals mockingly vibrant. I placed them in a vase, not to admire them, but as a reminder of what I needed to do. My first move was to find out more about this Wendy Powell. I had her name, and, thanks to the delivery man's explanation, I knew the general area where she lived, the neighborhood where he had tried to deliver the flowers 3 times. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I spent the morning searching social media, but without knowing what she looked like or having more specific information, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. There were several Wendy Powells in our city. Which one was she? The young fitness instructor with the perfect body? The sophisticated businesswoman with the sleek bob? The artistic photographer with bohemian style? Each possibility twisted the knife deeper in my heart. By afternoon, I realized I was approaching this the wrong way. I needed more concrete information, and there was only one way to get it. Next Wednesday, instead of waiting at home with a fake smile and dinner ready, I would follow David, see with my own eyes where he went, who he met, what he did on these mysterious Wednesday evenings. The waiting would be torture. Almost a full week of pretending everything was normal. Almost a full week of sleeping beside him, cooking for him, smiling at him, all while knowing he was betraying me. But I could do it. I had to do it, if only to respect myself enough to face the truth, whatever it might be. As I prepared dinner that Thursday evening, my hands moved mechanically, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, setting plates. But my mind was elsewhere, crafting a plan. I would need to borrow my friend's car, so David wouldn't recognize the vehicle. I would need to leave work early. I would need a convincing excuse for not being home, when he called to say he'd be working late again. When David came home that night, I greeted him with a kiss and asked about his day. He talked about meetings and projects, clients and deadlines. I nodded and smiled at all the right moments, playing the role of the attentive wife. Inside, however, something had changed. The hurt was still there, sharp and raw, but alongside it now burned a determination I hadn't felt in years. As the days passed, I maintained the facade of normalcy while setting my plan in motion. I prepared David's favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, and even initiated intimacy one night, all while gathering the tools I would need for my investigation. I downloaded a tracking app on my phone. I studied the fastest routes from his office to different parts of the city. I even practiced driving in a way that wouldn't attract attention if I were following someone. By Tuesday night, everything was ready. I had borrowed my colleague's car, a nondescript sedan that wouldn't stand out. I had told David I would be having dinner with a friend after work on Wednesday. I had even bought a dark baseball cap and sunglasses as a simple disguise, just in case. That night, as David slept soundly beside me, I stared at his face in the dim light. The face I had loved for 12 years. The face I thought I knew better than my own. Now it seemed like the face of a stranger. What secrets hid behind those familiar features? What lies had those lips told me? Tomorrow, I would find out. Wednesday morning arrived with a strange sense of calm. I kissed David goodbye as he left for work, knowing that by nightfall, our lives might never be the same again. Whatever I discovered today would determine our future, or the lack of one. With this thought firmly in my mind, I closed the door behind him and began preparing for the most important surveillance operation of my life. The hours at work crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every few minutes, I caught myself checking the time, calculating how long until 5 o'clock, when I would leave to begin my surveillance. My colleagues must have noticed my distraction, but thankfully no one commented. By 4:30, I couldn't focus anymore. I packed up my things, made a quick excuse about a doctor's appointment, and headed to the parking lot where my friend's borrowed car waited. The sedan was nothing special, a gray 4-door that blended perfectly with every other commuter vehicle. That's exactly why I'd chosen it. I slipped into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirrors, and took a deep breath. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the key in the ignition. This was it. There would be no going back after today. I drove to David's office building and parked across the street, positioning myself where I could see the entrance but wouldn't be immediately visible to someone exiting. Then I waited. The digital clock on the dashboard showed 5:23. David usually left work around 6, but on his late meeting Wednesdays, who knew what his schedule truly was? At 5:45, my patience was rewarded. David emerged from the building, briefcase in hand, checking his watch with that purposeful stride I knew so well. He wasn't heading to the parking garage, where he normally left his car. Instead, he walked 2 blocks and hailed a taxi. My heart rate accelerated. This wasn't his usual behavior. Keeping a safe distance, I followed the taxi through downtown traffic. After about 15 minutes, it pulled up outside an upscale florist shop in a neighborhood I rarely visited. David got out, paid the driver, and entered the store. I parked nearby, pulled the baseball cap low over my face, and waited. 10 minutes later, he emerged holding an elegant arrangement of red roses, not unlike the ones that had been mistakenly delivered to our house. The sight sent a wave of nausea through me. Here was the proof, right before my eyes. He hadn't even tried to be creative. Same flowers, probably the same message. Was this his routine? Every Wednesday, buy flowers for his mistress before going to see her? David hailed another taxi. I waited until they were a block away before pulling back into traffic to follow. We traveled for about 20 minutes, leaving the downtown area and heading toward a residential neighborhood of modern apartment complexes and townhouses. When the taxi stopped in front of a sleek building with large windows and balconies adorned with plants, I pulled over several car lengths behind. I watched as David paid the driver, straightened his tie, and checked his reflection in a window before approaching the building's entrance. He punched in a code. He clearly knew it by heart, and disappeared inside. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and opened the camera app. I needed evidence. Proof that wasn't just in my head. I needed something tangible to confront when doubts inevitably crept in during the lonely hours of the night. I waited in the car, debating my next move. Part of me wanted to storm into that building, find whatever apartment he'd gone to, and create a scene that neither he nor his mistress would ever forget. But the calmer, more calculating part of me knew that wasn't the right approach. I needed to see everything, understand everything, before making my move. 45 minutes passed. I alternated between checking my phone, watching the building entrance, and fighting back tears that threatened to blur my vision. Just as I was considering leaving, this surveillance was torturing me more than it was helping. The building's front door opened. A young woman stepped out, followed by David. Even from a distance, I could see she was beautiful. Tall and slender, with honey blonde hair that fell in loose waves past her shoulders. She looked to be in her early 30s, younger than me, of course. She wore a form-fitting dress that accentuated her figure, and when she smiled up at David, her entire face lit up. I fumbled with my phone, managing to snap several photos as David handed her the flowers. She accepted them with visible delight, leaning in to inhale their fragrance before looking up at him with an adoring expression. Then, the moment I had been dreading yet needing to see, she placed her free hand on his cheek and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, but a lover's kiss, intimate and familiar. David's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Tears streamed down my face as I continued taking photos, my finger mechanically pressing the button while my heart shattered into a million pieces. I had known, of course. The flowers delivered to our house had left little doubt. But seeing my husband of 12 years kiss another woman with such tenderness and passion, was a pain unlike anything I'd ever experienced. They pulled apart, and she said something that made him laugh. Then she took his hand and led him back inside the building. The door closed behind them, but the image of their embrace was seared into my mind. I sat in the car, sobbing quietly, until I could no longer see through my tears. I didn't know how long I remained there. 10 minutes? An hour? Time seemed meaningless in the face of such betrayal. Eventually, I wiped my eyes, took several deep breaths, and started the car. I couldn't stay there all night, watching and waiting for my husband to emerge from his lover's apartment. As I drove home through streets blurred by tears and darkness, my mind raced with questions and possibilities. How long had this been going on? Who was she? What had he told her about himself, about his life, about me? When I reached our house, the home we had built together, I sat in the driveway, unable to go inside just yet. Our living room light was on. I had left it that way to maintain the illusion that life continued normally. But nothing was normal anymore. Nothing would ever be normal again. My phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Meeting running late. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you." I stared at those 3 final words. Love you. How could he write them so casually while he was in another woman's bed? How many lies had he told? How many messages like this had he sent while betraying everything our marriage stood for? Instead of responding, I scrolled through the photos I had taken. Despite my emotional state, they had turned out clear enough. There was no mistaking David, no mistaking the passionate embrace, no mistaking the roses identical to those that had been delivered to our home by mistake. Something shifted inside me as I looked at those images. The devastating pain began to transform, hardening into something else. Determination. David thought he was so clever, juggling his double life, feeding me lies I willingly swallowed. But his perfect deception had cracked, and now I held the power to shatter it completely. I went inside and headed straight for our home office. From the filing cabinet, I pulled our most recent bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, anything that might reveal how long this affair had been going on, how much of our shared resources had been spent on his secret romance. The evidence was there. Once I knew what to look for. Restaurant charges in neighborhoods he rarely visited, an unusual increase in taxi receipts, even a hotel charge from 2 months ago, a weekend he'd claimed to be at a business conference. As midnight approached, I had assembled a damning collection of evidence. But I still didn't have a name or any details about the woman herself. I needed more information before deciding how to proceed. I heard the garage door opening around 12:30. David was home, earlier than I had expected. Quickly, I gathered the financial documents and photos, hiding them in a folder that I tucked into my bedside table drawer. Then I slipped into bed, turned off the light, and pretended to be asleep. He entered quietly, careful not to wake me. How considerate of him. I listened as he moved around the bedroom, changing clothes, brushing his teeth in the ensuite bathroom. When he finally slid into bed beside me, I could smell her perfume on his skin. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to confront him then and there. Instead, I lay perfectly still, controlling my breathing, waiting until his own breathing deepened and slowed with sleep. Only then did I allow myself to open my eyes and look at him in the dim light filtering through the curtains. This man, this stranger, sleeping so peacefully beside me, while my world collapsed. A plan began to form in my mind. I wouldn't confront David immediately. No, that would be too simple, too predictable. He would deny, minimize, apologize, promise to end it. All the typical responses of a cheater caught in the act. And in the emotional turmoil that followed, he might even manage to manipulate me into forgiveness. No, I needed something more. Something that would make him truly understand what he had done. Something that would ensure both he and his lover experienced the same shock and betrayal I was feeling now. As the first light of dawn crept through our bedroom window, I had made my decision. Next Wednesday would be special indeed, but not in the way David was expecting. I would make sure of that. Morning came, and with it, the beginning of my own deception. I prepared breakfast as usual, kissed David goodbye, and wished him a good day at work. If he noticed the coldness behind my smile, he gave no indication. Once he was gone, I began the next phase of my plan. I needed to learn more about the mysterious Wendy Powell, and I knew just how to do it. I called in sick to work that Thursday, something I rarely did. This mission required my full attention. After dropping David off at his office with a perfectly rehearsed kiss, goodbye, I returned home and began my investigation in earnest. The photos I had taken provided a good starting point. The woman was clearly visible, and the building where she lived was distinctive. Using the location data from my phone, I pinpointed the exact address. A quick online search revealed it was a luxury apartment complex called Riverside Heights. Units starting at $3,500 per month. Not cheap. I spent the morning searching social media with renewed purpose. Now that I had clear photos and a specific location, finding Wendy Powell was considerably easier. Within an hour, I had located her Instagram profile. Private, of course, but her profile picture confirmed it was the same woman. 32 years old, according to her bio, which also described her as a marketing executive and fitness enthusiast. The age difference wasn't dramatic, 7 years younger than me, but enough to feed my insecurities. What surprised me was how recent her account seemed to be. Created only 6 months ago, with just 27 followers. Strange for someone her age in a marketing career. I tried Facebook next, and found a similarly sparse profile created around the same time. It was almost as if she'd appeared out of nowhere 6 months ago. I dug deeper, searching for older accounts, perhaps under a different name. Nothing. Public records searches yielded minimal information. A Wendy Powell had indeed rented an apartment at Riverside Heights 5 months ago, but prior to that, there was no trace of her in our city. Where had she come from? What was her story? The mystery only intensified my determination. I needed to understand who this woman was that had captivated my husband so completely that he would risk our 12-year marriage. By early afternoon, I had hit a wall in my digital investigation. I needed more direct intelligence. Making a snap decision, I changed into a business casual outfit, applied makeup carefully to hide my exhaustion, and drove to Riverside Heights. The building's lobby was elegant and modern, with a concierge desk staffed by a young man in a crisp uniform. I approached with confidence, having prepared my story on the drive over. "Good afternoon," I said with a friendly smile. "I'm here to surprise my friend Wendy Powell. We went to college together, and I'm in town just for today. I was hoping to leave a gift for her." The concierge smiled back. "That's very thoughtful of you. Ms. Powell is in apartment 714. Would you like me to call up and let her know you're here?" "Oh, no," I replied quickly. "She's at work now. I know her schedule. I just wanted to leave this with you." I placed a small gift bag I had hastily prepared on the counter. "It's just a little something from our hometown. Could you make sure she gets it when she returns?" "Of course," he said, taking the bag. "I'll personally ensure she receives it. Thank you so much. By the way, she mentioned there's a great coffee shop nearby that she frequents. Do you happen to know which one? I'd love to grab a cup before heading to the airport." The concierge nodded. "That would be Crescent Cafe, just around the corner. Ms. Powell stops there most mornings. They make excellent lattes." "Perfect, thank you," I said, turning to leave. "Wait," he called after me. "I need your name to let Ms. Powell know who left the gift." "Oh, of course." "Sarah?" I said, giving a false name. "Sarah from Baltimore. She'll know." Once outside, I removed the gift bag from my purse, the one I had switched with the decoy I'd left at the concierge desk. Inside was nothing special, just a scented candle I had lying around the house, rewrapped. The real purpose of my visit had been accomplished. I now had Wendy's apartment number and knew where she got her morning coffee. The next day, Friday, I arrived at Crescent Cafe at 7:30 in the morning, positioned myself at a corner table with a good view of the entrance, and waited. I had dressed differently from my usual style, wearing dark sunglasses and a hat, just in case David ever showed Wendy photos of me. At 8:15, she walked in. Even more stunning in daylight than she had appeared in the evening, Wendy moved with the confident grace of someone accustomed to turning heads. She ordered something from the barista, then stepped aside to wait, checking her phone with a slight frown. When her order was called, I heard it clearly. Oat milk latte with an extra shot for Wendy. She took her drink, thanked the barista with a warm smile, and left the cafe. I followed at a discreet distance, watching as she walked to a nearby office building with Apex Marketing Solutions emblazoned on its facade. So that part of her social media profile was accurate. She did work in marketing. Over the weekend, I maintained the facade of normalcy with David. We went grocery shopping, watched a movie, even had dinner with friends on Saturday night, all while I silently gathered more intelligence and refined my plan. On Monday morning, I made a critical discovery. While David was in the shower, I checked his phone, something I had never done before our marriage imploded. His password hadn't changed since he first shared it with me years ago, our anniversary date. The irony wasn't lost on me. His text messages with Wendy were saved under WP Work Contact. Clever, but not clever enough. I scrolled through their exchanges, my stomach clenching with each flirtatious message, each miss you and can't wait to see you. But what truly caught my attention was a conversation from 2 months ago. Wendy, sometimes I worry about your situation. David, don't. I told you, I've been divorced for 5 years. My ex lives in Boston now. Wendy, you never talk about her. David, what's to talk about? Ancient history. You're my present and future. I nearly dropped the phone. He had told her he was divorced? That I lived in Boston? My hands shook with a potent mixture of rage and disbelief. He wasn't just cheating. He was living an entirely fabricated life with this woman. Further messages revealed more lies. He claimed to live in the neighboring city, but stayed in our area frequently, for work. He had told her his mother lived in Florida, when Martha actually lived just 20 minutes from us. Every aspect of his life with me had been erased or rewritten to facilitate his affair. Tuesday evening, I finalized my plan. After David left for work on Wednesday morning, I drove to a photo printing service and had a large print made of my best image, the one showing David and Wendy kissing outside her apartment building, the roses clearly visible in her hand. Next, I visited a florist. Not the one David used, I had discovered which one that was during my investigation, but a smaller shop across town, where no one would recognize me as his wife. I'd like to order a single red rose, I told the florist, to be delivered tomorrow evening to this address. I handed over Wendy's information. Just one rose? The florist asked, clearly used to more elaborate orders. Yes, just one. With this note, I handed her a small card on which I had written, "Thought you should know who you're really dating." From, the wife he said was in Boston. I also gave her the envelope containing the photograph. Please include this with the delivery. Oh, the florist said, her eyes widening as she understood the situation. Of course. We'll make sure it's delivered exactly as you've requested. Wednesday came, the day that would change everything. I told David I had an evening book club meeting. Another lie to mirror his own. He kissed me goodbye in the morning, completely unaware that I had spent the night plotting the end of his comfortable double life. After he left, I drove to Riverside Heights and parked where I had a clear view of the entrance, but wouldn't be easily spotted. I'd timed the flower delivery for 6:30, when I estimated David would already be inside Wendy's apartment, based on his pattern from the previous week. The hours crawled by. At 5:45, I saw David arrive, roses in hand, just as before. He entered the code and disappeared inside. 20 minutes later, the delivery van from the florist pulled up. The driver, a young woman, took out a single rose and an envelope. She entered the building. I waited, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. 10 minutes passed, then 15. At exactly 7 o'clock, the building's front door burst open. David stumbled out, his face contorted with panic. Behind him, Wendy appeared, still holding the single rose in one hand and what I assumed was my photograph in the other. Even from a distance, I could see the fury in her posture. "You lied to me!" Her voice carried across the quiet street. "You told me you were divorced. You said your ex lived in Boston." David turned, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Wendy, please, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're married? That everything between us has been based on lies?" She threw the rose at him, followed by what looked like the crumpled photograph. "Get out of my life, David. Now." He tried to approach her, but she backed away. "Don't touch me. I've been cheated on before, and I swore I would never be part of something like that. Do you know how this makes me feel? Not just betrayed by you, but guilty for what I've unknowingly done to your wife." David's shoulders slumped. He made one more attempt to speak, but Wendy cut him off with a dismissive wave before turning and storming back inside the building. Left alone on the sidewalk, David looked utterly defeated. He picked up the crumpled photograph, stared at it for a long moment, then slowly scanned the surrounding area. I ducked lower in my seat, though I doubted he could see me in the gathering darkness. Finally, he pulled out his phone, presumably to call a taxi, and sat heavily on a nearby bench to wait. His whole body language had transformed from the confident, romantic lover of minutes ago to a man whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. I started my car and drove home, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within me. Satisfaction? Yes. My plan had worked perfectly. But also a deep, aching sadness for what had been lost, for the 12 years we had shared, for the future we would never have. When I arrived home, I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. Would David come home tonight? Or would he slink off to a hotel, too ashamed to face me? Either way, I was prepared for the confrontation that would inevitably come. The truth was out now, exposed like a raw nerve. There was no going back to the lies and pretense of before. I pulled out the folder containing all my evidence, the bank statements, the phone records, the additional photos I had taken, and screenshots of his text messages with Wendy. I placed it on the kitchen counter beside my wine glass and settled in to wait. At 9:30, I heard his key in the lock. The game was over. The time for truth had finally arrived. The door opened slowly, almost hesitantly. David entered our home looking utterly destroyed, his normally immaculate shirt wrinkled, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. When he saw me sitting calmly at the kitchen counter, wine glass in hand, his step faltered. "Rachel." My name came out as barely more than a whisper. His eyes darted from my face to the folder on the counter, then back to me. "You're home." "Yes, David, I'm home. Where I've always been. Not in Boston, as you've apparently been telling people." I took a deliberate sip of wine, maintaining eye contact over the rim of the glass. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, as if he lacked the strength to stand upright on his own. "You know, it wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, I know everything. How did you—" I cut him off. "Does it matter? The flowers got delivered to our house by mistake last week, the ones you sent to Wendy." I saw the card. His face paled even further, if that was possible. "Last week? You've known for a week?" "Yes, and instead of confronting you immediately, I decided to find out exactly what I was dealing with." I gestured to the folder. "It's all there, David. The photos of you and Wendy, your text messages where you tell her you've been divorced for 5 years, the receipts for dinners, hotels, gifts, all while you told me you were working late." David took a few unsteady steps toward the counter, but stopped short of actually approaching me. "Rachel, I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "That's exactly what you said to Wendy tonight, isn't it? How did that work out for you?" I pushed the folder toward him. "Go ahead. I'm listening. Explain to me how you've been living a double life. Explain how you've been lying to both of us. I'm particularly interested in hearing why you told her I live in Boston." He sank into a chair, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "That's not an explanation, David. That's a cliché." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I met Wendy at a conference 6 months ago. She had just moved here after ending a long-term relationship. We got talking. There was a connection. And you decided to pursue that connection by pretending to be divorced? I told her I was married at first, he said quietly. But she was adamant she wouldn't get involved with a married man. She'd been cheated on before and said she'd never do that to another woman. A bitter laugh escaped me. How ironic. The one decent person in this mess is the woman you were having an affair with. When I realized she was serious about not seeing married men, I told her I was divorced, that my ex-wife had moved to Boston. It was supposed to be just a brief thing, a fling. I never expected it to continue, to become... He trailed off. To become what, David? Serious? Were you planning to maintain this fiction indefinitely? What was your end game here? He shook his head. I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I just kept getting in deeper and deeper. I stood up, unable to remain still any longer. For 12 years, I believed in us. I trusted you. I built my life around our marriage. And all this time, you were capable of this level of deception. I paced the kitchen, the anger I had been controlling now surfacing. Do you have any idea what it felt like to see those photos? To read those messages? To realize that everything I thought we had was a lie? Not everything was a lie, he said, his voice breaking. Rachel, I still love... Don't! I cut him off sharply. Don't you dare say you love me right now. People who love each other don't do what you've done. He fell silent, staring at his hands on the table. Did you sleep at her place every Wednesday night? I asked, needing to know the full extent of his betrayal. He nodded slowly. And that business conference 2 months ago? The weekend in Philadelphia? I was with her, he admitted. We went to Atlantic City. Each confirmation felt like a fresh stab wound, but I pressed on. Were there others? Before Wendy? David's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. A few brief things. Nothing serious. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Not just Wendy. There had been others. Our entire marriage had been punctuated by his infidelities. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Rachel, please, he began, reaching toward me. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but we can work through this. We can get counseling. Rebuild. Stop. My voice was ice cold. There is no rebuilding from this, David. You haven't made mistakes. You've made calculated decisions over and over again to betray me. You created an entire fictional life to facilitate your affair with Wendy. What are you saying? Fear crept into his voice. I'm saying it's over. I contacted a lawyer yesterday. The divorce papers will be ready by the end of the week. His face crumpled. You can't mean that. 12 years, Rachel. 12 years together. You're willing to throw that away? I'm not the one who threw it away. My voice rose for the first time. You did that, David. Every time you lied to me. Every time you slept with another woman. Every time you used our anniversary as your phone password while texting your mistress. He flinched at that last detail. You went through my phone? Seriously? That's what bothers you? Not the fact that you've been systematically lying to me for months? Years, apparently? I shook my head in disbelief. Yes, I went through your phone. After I saw you kissing Wendy outside her apartment building last Wednesday. After I followed you and watched you give her the same red roses you've probably given to all your mistresses. David buried his face in his hands. I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say. I want you out of this house tonight. You can stay at your mother's, or a hotel, or with whatever other women you might have on standby. I don't care. Just leave. Rachel, please. I said leave. I pointed to the door, my hand trembling with the force of my emotions. Take what you need for tonight, and go. We'll figure out the rest later, through our lawyers. He stood slowly, defeated. Can I at least pack a bag? I nodded curtly, then watched as he trudged upstairs to our bedroom. 20 minutes later, he returned with a hastily packed suitcase. He stopped in the foyer, looking at me with pleading eyes. Is there anything I can say that would make you reconsider? I met his gaze steadily. No. With one last despairing look, he opened the door and left. As it closed behind him, I felt a curious mixture of devastation and relief wash over me. The confrontation I had been dreading was over. The marriage I had believed in was over. But the lies and deception were over too. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and carried it upstairs to what had been our bedroom. I stripped the bed of its sheets and pillowcases, stuffing them into a laundry bag. I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping surrounded by his scent, by the lingering evidence of our shared life. With fresh linens on the bed, I took a long, hot shower, as if I could wash away the last 12 years, along with the day's tension. Only when I was finally alone, clean and exhausted, lying in a bed that felt too large and too empty, did the tears come. I cried for the marriage I had lost, for the years I had invested, for the dreams that would never materialize. I cried until there were no tears left, until exhaustion finally pulled me into a dreamless sleep. The next morning, I awoke to the strange, hollow silence of a house that would never again be a home for two. I called in sick to work for the second time that week, something unheard of for me before this crisis, and spent the day in a fog, moving mechanically through the necessary tasks of living. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing constantly with texts from David. I didn't read them. I knew they would be some combination of apologies, justifications, and pleas, none of which would change anything. Around 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I approached cautiously, half expecting to find David on the doorstep, ready to continue last night's confrontation. Instead, I saw a young woman through the peephole, her honey blonde hair unmistakable even from this angle. Wendy. My first instinct was to ignore the bell, to pretend I wasn't home. What could we possibly have to say to each other? But curiosity won out. I opened the door. She looked different from the confident woman I had observed at the cafe and outside her apartment. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. "Mrs. Harris?" she asked tentatively. "Rachel?" I nodded, saying nothing. "I'm Wendy Powell. She faltered, clearly struggling with what to say. "I think we need to talk." For a long moment, I considered closing the door in her face. This woman had been sleeping with my husband for months. But then again, she had been deceived just as I had, and there was something in her expression, a mixture of guilt, pain, and determination. That resonated with me. "Come in," I said finally, stepping back to allow her entry. She followed me to the living room, perching nervously on the edge of the sofa, while I took the armchair opposite. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "I didn't know he was married," she blurted out finally. "I swear to you I had no idea. He told me he'd been divorced for 5 years, that his ex-wife, you, lived in Boston. I would never knowingly date a married man." "I know," I said quietly. "I read your texts." Her eyes widened slightly at this revelation, but she continued. "When I got that rose and saw the photograph, I can't even describe how I felt. Betrayed by David, of course, but also horrified at what I'd unknowingly done to you." "You didn't do anything to me," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "David did this. To both of us." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was in a 7-year relationship before moving here. He cheated on me repeatedly. When I finally found out, it destroyed me. The thought that I've now been part of causing that same pain to someone else." She shook her head, unable to continue. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of compassion for this woman. We were both victims of the same man's deception. "How did you find me?" I asked, changing the subject slightly. "Your address was on the back of the photograph," she explained. "And after David left last night, I found his real social media profiles. Once I knew his full name and that he was actually married, it wasn't hard to connect the dots." I nodded, remembering that I had written our address on the back of the photo to ensure the florist delivered to the correct location. "I came here because I thought you deserved to know the whole truth." Wendy continued. And because I needed to apologize, even though I didn't know, I needed you to hear it from me directly. I appreciate that, I said softly, studying the woman sitting across from me. The woman who, until yesterday, I had viewed as my rival, my enemy. Now, looking at her tear-stained face, I saw only another casualty of David's elaborate deceptions. It took courage to come here. Wendy wiped her eyes. I needed to tell you something else, too. After David left last night, I found a small jewelry box hidden in my apartment. It was tucked in a drawer where he kept some of his things. She reached into her purse and pulled out a velvet box, placing it on the coffee table between us. He was planning to give me this next week, on our 6-month anniversary. With trembling fingers, I opened the box. Inside was an elegant diamond pendant on a white gold chain. Expensive, tasteful, probably purchased with our joint credit card. There was a card with it, Wendy continued, her voice barely above a whisper. It said he was planning to ask me to move in with him, that he was going to rent an apartment in the city for us. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not just an affair then. David had been planning a future with this woman, constructing an entirely separate life parallel to our marriage. Did you have any suspicions? Wendy asked after a moment. Before the flowers were delivered by mistake? I considered the question, thinking back over the past months. There were signs, I admitted. Late nights, secretive phone habits. But I trusted him completely. We'd been together for 12 years. I never imagined he could maintain such an elaborate lie. 7 years for me, Wendy said, with my ex. And I never suspected a thing until I found evidence I couldn't ignore. It makes you question your own judgment, doesn't it? Makes you wonder how you could have been so blind. I nodded, feeling a strange kinship with this woman who understood exactly what I was experiencing. We sat in silence for a moment, two women united by betrayal at the hands of the same man. What will you do now? I finally asked. Start over. Again. Wendy sighed. I moved here 6 months ago for a fresh start after my last relationship ended. Now I feel like I'm back at square one. At least you found out before things went any further, I said, gesturing to the jewelry box. Before you moved in with him. And you? He looked at me with genuine concern. 12 years is a long time to just walk away from. I've already contacted a lawyer, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. The divorce papers should be ready tomorrow. David's staying at his mother's house for now. Wendy's eyes widened slightly. You're really going through with it? No second chances? Would you give him a second chance? Knowing what you know now? She shook her head without hesitation. Never. I couldn't trust a word he said. Exactly. I closed the jewelry box and handed it back to her. You should return this to him. Or sell it. Your choice. She took the box, slipping it back into her purse. I'm so sorry for all of this, Rachel. I truly am. It's not your fault, I said, meaning it completely now. We were both deceived by an expert liar. After Wendy left, I sat alone in the living room, processing our conversation. There was something unexpectedly healing about meeting her, about seeing the human being behind the other woman label I had assigned in my mind. She wasn't my enemy. She was just another woman who had made the mistake of trusting David Harris. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, paperwork, and adjustments to my new reality. David made several attempts to reconcile, sending flowers, I threw them away, leaving voicemails, I deleted them without listening, even showing up at our house one evening. I refused to let him in. His mother, Martha, called me 3 days after he moved in with her. Rachel, dear. Her warm voice came through the phone. I hope you don't mind me calling. I just wanted to check on you. I'm okay, Martha. Taking it day by day, I replied, surprised by how good it felt to hear her voice. David told me what happened, she said. Not at first. He tried to claim you were having problems, but I got the truth out of him eventually. I want you to know I'm absolutely appalled by his behavior. I hadn't expected that. Thank you for saying that. I was worried you might. take his side? Martha finished for me. Absolutely not. What he did to you, and to that other poor girl, is inexcusable. I raised him better than that. Her words brought tears to my eyes. That means a lot to me, Martha. You've been my daughter for 12 years, she said firmly. What David did doesn't change that, unless you want it to. I'd like to still have you in my life, if you're comfortable with that. By the time we hung up, I was crying. But for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of gratitude for this unexpected source of support. 1 month after the confrontation, David and I met at our lawyer's office to sign the final divorce papers. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. A part of me, a very small part, felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his systematic deception. "Rachel," he said as we exited the building, documents in hand. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" I hesitated, then nodded curtly. We walked to a nearby bench and sat, maintaining a careful distance between us. "I know nothing I can say will change what I did," he began, staring at his hands, "but I need you to know how sorry I am. I've lost everything that matters. You, my integrity, my self-respect. You didn't lose those things, David," I corrected him. "You threw them away. Deliberately. Repeatedly." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "You're right. I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." He looked at me directly for the first time. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you that you deserved better than what I gave you. You always did." I studied his face, the face I had loved for so long, the face I had trusted implicitly. "Yes," I said simply, "I did deserve better." I stood up, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind me once and for all. "Goodbye, David. Goodbye, Rachel," he whispered as I walked away. 6 months after signing the divorce papers, I received an unexpected message on my Instagram. It was from Wendy. "Hi, Rachel. I hope you're doing well. I'm moving to Seattle next week for a new job opportunity. I wanted to thank you before I go. Our conversation that day helped me more than you know. It showed me that even in the darkest moments, dignity and grace are possible. I hope you found some peace. You deserve every happiness." I smiled as I read her words, touched by the unexpected connection that had formed from our shared experience. I wrote back, wishing her well in Seattle, genuinely hoping she would find the fresh start she was seeking. As for me, my fresh start was taking shape in ways I hadn't anticipated. The divorce settlement had included our house, which I promptly sold, using part of the proceeds to rent a smaller but cozier apartment closer to downtown. I had reconnected with old friends whom I had neglected during my marriage, started taking a photography class I had always been interested in, and even joined a support group for divorced women, where I found understanding and solidarity. Martha and I maintained our relationship, meeting for lunch every few weeks. She never mentioned David during these gatherings unless I brought him up first, which I rarely did. Instead, we talked about our lives, her garden, my photography, books we had read, normal things that had nothing to do with the man who had connected us initially, but no longer defined our relationship. 1 year to the day after discovering David's betrayal, I stood in the airport terminal, passport and boarding pass in hand, waiting to board a flight to Barcelona. Spain had been a dream destination for years, a trip David had repeatedly promised but never delivered. Now I was going alone, the first stop on a 3-week European adventure I had planned for myself. As I settled into my seat on the plane, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, they hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still moments when memories would ambush me, when I would question how I could have been so deceived. But those moments had become less frequent, less overwhelming. In their place had grown something unexpected: strength. The discovery that had shattered my world had also, paradoxically, freed me from a relationship built on lies. The woman who had followed her husband to catch him in the act of betrayal was not the same woman now flying across the ocean to fulfill her own dreams. That woman, the old Rachel, had defined herself largely through her marriage, through her role as David's wife. This new Rachel was defining herself on her own terms, reclaiming pieces of herself that had been submerged during those 12 years of partnership. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into the air with a powerful surge. Through the window, I watched as my city grew smaller below me, perspective shifting with altitude. That's what the past year had given me. Perspective. The ability to see my life from a different angle, to recognize that what had felt like an ending was actually a beginning. My phone buzzed with a text message, the last one I would receive before switching to airplane mode. It was from Martha. "Safe travels, my dear. Remember, the best revenge is living well. Send pictures." I smiled, tucking the phone away as the plane climbed higher through the clouds. Martha was right. Living well was indeed the best revenge. But I wasn't living well to spite David anymore. I was living well because I deserved it. Because this life, with all its unexpected turns, was mine to shape however I chose. The pain of betrayal had taught me something valuable, that I was stronger than I knew, more resilient than I had ever needed to be before. It had forced me to rebuild, not just the external structures of my life, but my internal landscape as well, my sense of self, my understanding of what I wanted and deserved. As the plane leveled off above the clouds, bathed in golden sunlight, I opened the travel journal I had brought for the trip. On the first blank page, I wrote, "Day 1 of the rest of my life." The young woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal through a mistakenly delivered bouquet of roses would never have imagined herself here, flying solo across the Atlantic, embracing uncertainty and adventure. But that was the beautiful irony of life's most painful moments. They sometimes led to the most unexpected awakenings. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The journey had begun. And for the first time in a very long time, I was genuinely excited to discover where it would lead. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.